Hi, welcome back to my channel. Alright, so I've got a problem. It's a really wonderful problem to have, and that problem is that I have too many books. And here's the thing. I got back into reading during the pandemic, and then I just started collecting books, right? Because it was like, save all the local businesses and whatnot, so I did, single-handedly. We all know that reading and collecting are two different things, and that reading takes much longer than collecting does. So I have amassed a large physical TBR, and I am at the point where my tastes have also changed. So now I have this 4-year-old TBR sitting on my shelves, and here I am buying more books that fit my tastes now and that I want to read more now. This is a taste test. We're going to figure out if I like these books enough to keep them on my shelves. There was a time where I thought that horror was my favorite genre and that I loved fantasy. And it turns out that I am far more complex than that. My tastes are far more nuanced than I thought they were. And they have definitely changed since I was last a heavy reader, like before the pandemic. So I need to cull through some of those books that I bought and decide based on the first chapter or 10 pages, I think is what I'll do, if it's time to get rid of them. So I'm gonna give it a taste test and then decide if it's time to unhaul. I'm gonna go through 5 books today, and I chose all of them just from horror. I actually put a poll up on my Instagram and I just said, hey, what genre should I start with? And people chose horror. Let's just dive right in. So the first book is Intercepts by T.J. Payne. I don't know really what compelled me to buy this, besides the cover maybe. Like, I think the cover is super duper creepy. Joe works at a secret government facility that performs human experimentation. The inmates, after subjected to extreme sensory deprivation, go insane. Their brains turn to mush. But if the procedure is done properly, these shells of humans develop a strange new ability. They are able to intercept the sights and senses of anyone in the world. Joe has used this procedure to catch terrorists, arms dealers, and drug lords. He is very proud of his work. But then, when Joe's teenage daughter comes to live with him, she starts having terrifying hallucinations. She sees a woman following her everywhere. The woman screams, the woman claws the skin from her own face, the woman demands to be set free. No one else sees this woman. Either Joe's daughter is having a mental breakdown, or the inmates have found her, and they've intercepted her mind. I'm gonna read the first chapter. If the chapter is shorter than, 10 pages, I might keep reading a little bit if I haven't decided. Basically, things that I'm looking out for are definitely gonna be prose. If I'm reading it and it just sounds stupid, I'm not gonna be able to read the whole book. Another thing that I'm looking out for is grabbing my attention like right off the top. And then if this gives me chills like right off the bat, then I'm absolutely not getting rid of it. I can say I'm really worried about not trusting my gut when reading this. I am really in touch with my intuition, but when it comes to reading books, I pretty much doubt everything. And so I'm gonna try and quell the doubt while reading this. Okay, I just finished the prologue. It was interesting, really descriptive, and I wasn't really impressed with the writing. But right now I'm at kind of a coin toss because I'm like interested to know what happens next based on the prologue, and I also didn't particularly care for the writing. Okay, I got to like page 8 and I was zoning out. It just wasn't really interesting to me. Kind of starts off with this guy suiting up for lab work. That's not an interesting location to me. And also the writing was pretty, like, it's just kind of mid. This isn't really grabbing my attention. So I'm going to get rid of this. All right, the next book, come on, stop it. The next book is by an author who I've read before and I loved their previous work, and that was The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. He has written a horror novel, or had written a horror novel, called Zone 1. Now, I actually tried reading this book a while ago and found it to be kind of boring at the time. From what I remember, this is most likely going to be a choice that I'm going to chuck. A pandemic has devastated the planet, sorting humanity into 2 types, the uninfected and the infected, the living and the living dead. After the worst of the plague is over, armed forces stationed in Chinatown's Fork Wonton? Ian, you're hungry! Armed forces stationed in Chinatown's Fort Wonton have successfully reclaimed the island south of Canal Street, aka Zone 1. Mark Spitz is a member of one of the three-person civilian sweeper units tasked with clearing Lower Manhattan of the remaining feral zombies. Zone 1 unfolds over 3 surreal days during which Spitz is occupied with the mundane mission of straggler removal, the rigors of post-apocalyptic stress disorder, and the impossible task of coming to terms with a fallen world. And then things start to go terribly wrong. So it's interesting because it's like good blurbs from like LA Times, Washington Post, New York Times Book Review, Esquire on the front. Clearly critics liked this. As I recall, this is one of Colson Whitehead's like lowest rated books. I like pandemic novels. Sorry, but I do. And I love zombie movies. So I thought, okay, this is gonna be a lot of fun. So here we go. Okay, I only got to page, I don't know, like it was 5 or 6 or something like that. And yeah, page 5. I am really not feeling this. This is very, 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 very purple language. The metaphors in this are pretty thick. Like, he's an amazing writer. This feels like beyond literary. And I love literary fiction, but if I am going to read a novel whose premise is about a zombie pandemic, I just don't want to read it in that style. I am going to unhaul this. The next book that I'm going to read, this isn't one that I remember buying. It's called The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. The back is documentary filmmaker Alice Lindstedt has been obsessed with the vanishing residents of an old mining town dubbed the Lost Village since she was a little girl. In 1959, her grandmother's entire family disappeared in the mysterious tragedy, and ever since, the unanswered questions surrounding the only 2 people who were left, a woman stoned to death in the town center and an abandoned newborn, have plagued her. She's gathered a small crew of friends in the remote village to make a film about what really happened, but there will be no turning back. Not long after they've set up camp, mysterious things begin to happen. Equipment is destroyed, people go missing, as doubt breeds fear, and their very minds begin to crack. One thing becomes startlingly clear to Alice. They are not alone. They're looking for the truth, but what if it finds them first? Come find out. That was a wordy. So this is a translated work, translated by Alexandra Fleming. So this has gotta be, Alice Lindstedt? That's gotta be, what, Swedish, you think? Maybe? Originally published in Sweden in 2019. I'm a little more intrigued now. At some point I forgot, or maybe even never knew, that this was a translated work. So I'm a little more intrigued now. I don't know if this is all diary entries. We'll find out. You know what? We're gonna find out. Here we go. Okay, so I read 10 pages. There's like a diary entry at the beginning that's a cold open and it ends with a banger. And then right after that, it shifts into almost like an ad for the documentary, like raising money for the documentary that they want to make about the town. And then it shifts into first person perspective. And then it starts talking about their social media page. And I'm like, I'm doing social media. I don't really want to read about it. Now I'm really torn because the first chapter was great and then the beginning of the second chapter was not my jam. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to look up the ratings, see what people are saying about this. I will say that usually like a 3.8, well, that's good. On Goodreads, like a 3.8 or above is a good sign for me, like especially when it comes to horror. I'm going to check. We'll do this together. I'm going to check. So here's what I'm gonna do. I just read Stolen Tongues by, I think it was Felix Blackwell, and I really liked it. 4.5-star kind of thing. It was a really, really scary book, and that's why I read horrors, to like be scared. On Goodreads, it's 3.82 is the average rating, and then I'm gonna see if I can't pull up Fable. On Fable, it's a 3.5 stars. So my hunch is that I probably have a higher tolerance for some horror stuff than most other people. So 3.82 for Stolen Tongues. This is called The Lost Village. And 3.53, definitely lower. And it also looks like it's more like mystery thriller, which is not my jam. And it looks like the majority of the ratings are 4 and 3 stars. So for the most part, people are generally positive on it. It doesn't look like it's what's the word, like very polarizing. So Lost Village, it's the same rating on Fable as Stolen Tongues is, so of course that doesn't really help me. Based on the fact that on Goodreads, which I don't really like to use, but based on the fact that it is tagged as a mystery thriller, it goes horror, thriller, mystery, I am probably not gonna be into this. So I'm gonna go ahead and unhaul it, knowing full well that I could be missing something really amazing here, fully aware of that. But what I'm gathering is most people aren't absolutely loving this, and sometimes reading something mediocre and middle of the road is so much more difficult than reading something detestable. We're going to unhaul it, but hey, we're creating some room for new books. The next book that I have, written by Noelle W. Eiley, or Ely, I don't know how you say it, it's The Thicket. I've heard good things about this, and I've heard bad things about this. I love the cover. I think it says a lot in a simple image, and I like that. So the back says, Nora ignored her brother's screams that night because nothing in the haunted attraction was supposed to be real, let alone deadly. Later, security footage will reveal that the killer walked right through the crowded plaza, his clothes stained red. Desperate for answers and tormented by survivor's guilt, Nora returns to the scene of the crime, and to her horror, the chorus of screams is louder than ever. Thrill seekers, including some of her classmates, are still eagerly lining up to purchase tickets. But the killer hasn't chosen his hunting ground at random, and, like everyone else, he's planning another visit. So I'm getting slasher vibes in this, which is not my favorite. And when I bought this, I thought all horror books were my favorite, but that does not apply to slashers. I'm gonna read this, see if it sparks my interest. We will find out what I think of the writing. Here we go. I read about 7 pages, and this is just coming across as mid. I'm not saying that it will be bad. I think there's shifting perspectives, which I tend to enjoy if done well. This doesn't seem like it's written poorly. However, I can tell this is just gonna feel so straight. I think it's gonna feel very hetero, and I'm just not interested in that. So I'm gonna go ahead and chuck this, and hopefully someone who will actually love this is gonna be the one to pick it up after me. Last but not least is Edenville, and that's by Sam Rebeline, right? Rebeline? Is that how you say it? I remember hearing about this when it first came out, and I was like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. And so I went and bought it, and then maybe like 2 weeks later, I looked at the ratings, and the ratings were like awful, and the reviews were like, this is so bad. So now here I am, cool. I bought this at full price because that's how excited I was for it. I love sunflowers too, because I'm from Kansas, and that's the Kansas state flower. So I was just like, stop it, I need this. And then here we are, probably getting ready to not like this at all. After publishing his debut novel, The Shattered Man, to disappointing sales and reviews, Campbell P. Marion is struggling to find inspiration for a follow-up. When Edenville College invites him to join as a writer in residence, he's convinced that his bad luck has finally taken a turn. His girlfriend Quinn isn't so sure. She grew up near Edenville and has good reasons for not wanting to move back. Cam disregards her skepticism and accepts the job, with Quinn reluctantly following along. But there's something wrong in Edenville. Despite the charming old ladies milling about Main Drive and picturesque sunflowers dotting the sidewalks, poison lurks beneath the surface. As a series of strange and ominous events escalates among its residents, Cam and Quinn find themselves entangled in a dark and disturbing history. I still don't really know what this is about. The guy kind of sounds like an asshole already, so I'm not so sure how I'm gonna feel about this. Let's just go ahead and dive in here. For all the amazing English teachers I've ever had. That's actually really sweet. My mother was an English teacher, so soft spot in my heart for English teachers. We got The Artist's Way. Affirmations help achieve a sense of safety and hope. I am a channel for God's creativity, and my work comes to good. Which is followed by a quote by J.D. Salinger from The Catcher in the Rye. You can't trust anybody in a goddamn school. All right, there's a map in here. It's almost like we're reading fantasy, right? And an overture. First chapter is called The Gummer Folk. Here we go. I'm gonna remove this. I like that. I am not going to keep this. So here's the thing. I'll just be specific here. He says the word don't so many times, and it's written like long don't. If you don't know how to inform me that the vowel has been dragged out without literally typing it, I don't trust you as a writer. I just don't want to read the internet, and that's exactly what it feels like. There's also just like asides here that I think are super silly, but the thing didn't listen. Of course it didn't. Why would it? Okay, so we're doing internal thought. Stephen King does that a lot, and it's one of the few Stephen King things that I don't like it when he does it. Doing that totally takes me out of the moment. Also, this was not scary. It's cold open, I think is supposed to be like terrifying. The minute you describe the monster in detail to me, it loses everything that's scary about it, which is just like not knowing what the monster is or not fully understanding it or comprehending it or whatever. Like that's way scarier than the actual monster itself. And it goes into a description that I also couldn't even really picture because I had no experience of what melting someone's skin over bone is. I don't have a sensory experience to compare that to. We're gonna get rid of this one. I actually am surprised at how much I really don't like it. That's a clean sweep. That's 5 books that I am going to unhaul, probably put on Pango, whatever doesn't. Thank you so much for joining me in this activity. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you've DNF'd any of these books. I would love to like not be the only one. Don't forget to share and like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Happy reading. What the fuck am I even gonna call this episode? That I've